Now, our next speaker is the Bishop of Liverpool, Bishop Paul Bayes. Now, Paul is in his 8th year as Anglican Bishop of Liverpool. Before that, he's worked as an assistant bishop, as a national policy advisor, and as a parish priest and university chaplain. He's been busy, isn't he? He's sought to advocate for LGBTQ+ people within the church and the wider community, and tries as best as he can to act as an ally. So let's hear that viewpoint from Bishop Paul Bayes. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie and David. And I'm really grateful to Steve and the team for the invitation to speak this morning. Thank you all, friends, for your welcome. It's an honor to be here.
Paul, Paul, you're muted.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Can you hear me now, friends? Someone tell me.
I can hear you, Paul.
Okay. Can other people hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. I'm going to work on a basis that you can hear me. If you can't hear me, you'll have to interrupt me and stop me, because I'm just as you are, a long way away. Really grateful for the opportunity to speak this morning. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to stand with the aims of the conference. And I've been asked to talk about the role of allies in creating transjustice. And I want to begin by trying to brush aside a misunderstanding about what being an ally means. And that misunderstanding is a kind of power idea. And it goes like this. Allies are people who've got their own lives together, and because they're really generous, they've decided to help some poor group of people whose lives are fragmented by confusion or by social pressure and who need champions to fight for them. I call that a power idea because it produces so-called allies who are really in charge and who want to dispense bounty and wisdom from some powerful place. And I just need to say, friends, that's not how I see being an ally. And indeed, I think if you do see it that way, then you're the worst kind of ally there could possibly be. The dictionary definition I like about an ally is this, and I'm quoting the book: to combine or unite with another person for mutual benefit. I like that definition. Carrie and David said at the start today, as allies themselves and parents, they want to accompany people on a journey. It's accompanying people on a journey that I want to do. A minute ago, Rachel called herself a back number. Well, I'm prehistoric, friends. I'm a 67-year-old cis, straight, white man. I've got a job in the church that gives me a platform. And so I'm bathed in privilege. And it's a privilege that blinkers, and it can so easily puff up. And I want to be an ally in creating justice. Because if people today, trans people, non-binary people, more widely LGBTQI+ people, or Black people, working class people, if people are not free, then I'm not free. Sean Fay's got a book out recently. Ironically, it's called The Transgender Issue. I say ironically because in it, Sean writes this: we, that's trans people, are not an issue to be debated and derided. We are symbols of hope for non-trans people too, who see in our lives the possibility of living more fully and more freely. That's what I think. I want to stand as an ally because I believe I need to lose the blinkers of my privilege and to wake up and to work to begin to understand the experience of those that I stand with, so that I myself may be free and may receive life and joy from the place where God is to be found, that is from the edge of things. In short, friends, I want to and I need to be an ally for my soul's health. I want to be an ally, but I know that you don't get to call yourself an ally. It's for the community on the edge of things to give you the title if they think you deserve it. So whether I'm an ally or not, it's not for me to say, but I want to be one. I got ready for this session by talking to 4 people I know from my own area, trans or non-binary people, for advice. And one of the themes of that advice was that I should recognize and be honest about my own transphobia and seek healing from it. That's where my walk as an ally begins. I live with my unconscious bias and I need it to become conscious. I sleepwalk often and I need to wake up. I don't believe it's the responsibility of my trans friends to heal my transphobia, but I want to attempt the work of healing so that I can be a better ally because a freer person. I believe allies can offer help, though, and that the work we can offer is around clearing space and making space and then stepping back and relinquishing space. Because of who I am or the job I've got or the title I've got, I may have access to a space that I can clear or help to build or establish and then quit so that people on the edge of things may come into that space with confidence. That may be particularly necessary where that space is contended. And the space, as we've heard this morning already, is fiercely contended for trans people at the moment. It's contended through old controversies in my own Christian faith community. It's contended politically in some of the nations across the world, sadly, often including this one. And it's contended by new controversies with the so-called gender critical advocates. I'm not called to be a champion as if my interventions might replace the real lives of real people like Rachel has just spoken. People who are already fully human, who are becoming more fully human in this struggle. Their humanity doesn't need me to affirm it. God affirms it. Sometimes you may hear rhetoric around the role of people with a platform, like bishops and others, that they're here to give a voice to the voiceless. I don't find that helpful if what it means is that I'm speaking and the voiceless still don't get a word in edgeways. But sometimes it is possible for allies to clear a space and to share a platform and then to leave the platform to those who speak for themselves and whose voice will persuade and convict and transform the conversation if only people will hear it. That's part of the allies' role, I think. Trans people are people. And in the end, it's understanding the lived experience of human beings that will change the world. Now, that's not to say that being an ally is some sort of neutral act, like being a chairperson, a neutral act that doesn't require courage. The trans space is one where disagreements can be violent. And if you're listening to this and you're a trans non-binary person, you know that violence in your own body, where people take what they think is the truth and they use it like a blade to hurt and to wound people. My father used to say, truth is a sharp sword. You can kill more than falsehood with it. In a world like that, people need to stand. As the Jesuit peace protester, the late Father Dan Berrigan used to say, it helps to know where you stand and stand there. Allies can and should be advocates, but not in a debate. Not in a space where, as Sophie McBain said recently in the New Statesman, some people are mostly attacked for their opinions and other people are mostly attacked for who they are. Too often in the church and elsewhere, the pressure is on for leaders to act as if everything was abstract and to treat the real lives of real people like counters in a game or examples in an Oxford Union debate. I don't believe that's right. As a Christian, I don't believe Jesus led that way. So what do I think? Trans men are men. Trans women are women. Non-binary people are people. My allyship starts there, and I'll try to say it clearly. And if that exposes me to the tiniest fraction of the hostility that many face daily, then I'll readily accept that as a consequence. I don't have the answers in these controversies. I'm a cis man, I'm an old man, so I need to learn from the experience and the lives of others, including those with a gender critical agenda. But meanwhile, justice is not a zero-sum game. And justice for trans non-binary people is not negotiable. Trans men are men, trans women are women, non-binary people are people. I'm starting there. I said earlier that I asked a few colleagues and friends for advice on how to be an ally in creating trans justice. And I asked them too to reflect on my own record as someone who tries to be an ally. And I'm really grateful to all four of them for taking the trouble to engage. Here's a couple of the things they said. What they all said was to make clear that you can't take one experience and generalize it. That's a foolish and a hurtful thing. Everyone is different. Honoring difference is the compass for advocacy in this matter. As one of my conversations partners said, When you've heard one trans story, you've done exactly that. When it comes to raising consciousness, I was told it helps not to take over conversations, but to listen. It's not the responsibility of trans people to educate cis people, but it is the responsibility of cis allies to understand and to read and speak and listen so as to understand better. Somebody said to me, do your own research. There are lots of resources out there about trans identities and trans culture, and doing your own research takes the onus off your local friendly trans person to explain everything all the time. Someone said, point away from yourself and don't assume your job is to be a voice for the voiceless. And I was reminded that this is a new time for many of us. And so, for example, mistakes in using pronouns or not avoiding dead names, mistakes are easily made. One of my conversation partners, a young person, said, if you do make mistakes, just apologize quickly and move on. Don't make a big deal out of it, but don't ignore it either. And they said, normalize asking for pronouns and giving your own. When you meet someone, try telling them which pronouns you use and give them space to respond if they want. And they said, help us to fight for our rights. Trans rights in the UK are under attack from transphobic hate groups, and the fight to be recognized and respected is long and hard. Protest with us, fight alongside us, donate to causes, help us in whatever way you can. A married trans person encouraged me to support the spouses of married trans people and to listen carefully there and not make assumptions. In particular, not to assume trauma in a relationship if trauma is not present. Same thing applies to assuming trauma in a person who's transitioning, when the reality may very well be that the transitioning is precisely healing from trauma. And finally, another person looked at all this complicated scene, and then they quoted the Bible and told me that in the Bible, the beginning of the Bible, it says, quote, God walks in the cool of the day. There's a spiritual discipline in wanting to be an ally. It involves prayer, and it involves listening, and it involves courage. There's a US saying from the cowboy West that President Lyndon Johnson had on his wall: if you're talking, you're not learning. One of my conversation partners said that allies sometimes need to be big and to have broad backs and loud mouths and big ears and strong hands. All of that helps, but big ears help most. So the role of allies in creating transjustice begins and ends in listening. God walks in the cool of the day. Bodies are mysterious, and desire is mysterious, and that makes people anxious, especially in my own faith space, where people think God has spoken clearly and it's all really clean. And so there's too much of the heat of the day. There's too much of people trying to force one another, cookie cut one another, to fit their own ideas of how God thinks the world should be. But the world is as it is. It's that messy O that Steve was talking about. In that world, I want to be a good ally. And so I'll be as loud and broad and strong as I can so that I can be helpful. And I'll do it so that I can be free with those who are becoming free, so that I can work to see trans and non-binary people flourish in our schools and in our businesses and in our faith communities and in our society. But for me, as a person of faith, it begins and ends in listening to the people who are pushed to the edge, to the people who matter most. That's what I aim to do. And that's how, by being an ally, I shall myself become more free and more fully human. Thanks for listening, friends.